Yes. Yes. That what you just heard there might be, Eric, as you have put it, the greatest drum fill in all of pop music.
It is for me.
And a perfect way to begin this episode of Get to the Hook, because we are celebrating the life of Quincy Jones, who passed away at the age of 91. And what a loss for the music world. But what a chance for us to just, not that Quincy Jones' music and accomplishments in entertainment aren't celebrated on the daily as it is, but this is a good time to remember what this man has done. And that song in particular, one of the songs he produced for Michael Jackson on their first album together, Off the Wall, that was Rock With You. And we're going to get into that a little bit later too. But I am your co-host, Charles Latibeaudiere.
And I'm your co-host, Eric Colley.
And welcome to Get to the Hook. And Quincy Jones, wow.
Like you said, he doesn't need it, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of tributes to him in the days and weeks and months to come. But it's one of those things, even when you know Quincy Jones, you know who he is and you know what he did, probably the first thing that comes to mind for everybody is his work with Michael Jackson.
Right.
And we will talk about that. But you forget how much he did.
It was long before Michael Jackson.
He was almost 50 when he did Thriller.
If he never did the stuff he did with Michael Jackson, he would still be someone that we were talking about today going, wow, what an incredible titan in entertainment. But then you add on those three albums, which might be the greatest three-album run
Off the
for
Wall,
any artist.
Thriller, and Bad.
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah. But yes, so much he had done long before that. And with people, you know, if all you knew about Quincy Jones, if your introduction to Quincy Jones, as mine was his production with Michael Jackson, if that's all you knew, you would probably think that he didn't work with the people that he did work with besides Michael, because they're not in the same vein.
It's such a wide range of musical styles, different artists, and not just music. His work in film, as not just doing music for film, but as a producer.
Television.
So much he did. And it started so young. I mean, when he was a teenager, I think he was 14, he met Ray Charles, who was 16 at the time. So he's teenage pals with Ray Charles. And
that alone sets you aside,
right.
Sets you apart.
And Quincy, not famous as a musician, but was a musician. He played different horns and things. And trumpet.
I've seen, yeah.
He played in jazz groups. He toured with Lionel Hampton as a jazz legend, Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie he worked with. And that's what was maybe why his producing is so great, especially his pop music producing, because he understood how to play as a musician. He understood how to arrange music. And he came to all of that from a jazz background. So he understood the interplay between different instruments, different artists, and he knew how to put that into pop music, which most pop producers don't know how to do that.
Right.
And most jazz producers don't know how to do that for pop. He knew how to do both. And in the late 50s, so he was in his 20s, a young Quincy Jones was playing and impressed Frank Sinatra. And that is probably not an easy thing to do, to impress Frank Sinatra so much.
As many people have said in working with Frank. But yeah, he did impress him.
And impressed him so much that in the 60s, Frank was doing an album with Count Basie, the two of them together, which sounds so intimidating. It was called It Might As Well Be Swing, which I love the pun of that. Quincy did not produce that album, but Frank brought him in to arrange it, which is very important. That's deciding basically what the song is going to sound like, what instruments will come in where. The producer actually took care of all that, but Quincy laid out the blueprint and arranged one of Sinatra's most iconic hits, this song, Fly Me to the Moon.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars.
Those little flutes popping in the background.
Popping in there.
Yeah.
So good, man.
That's Quincy, and that's what he could do as a producer. He knew how to put little touches and little flourishes in songs that you don't even always notice. They weren't the main hook. They weren't
the main hook, but they stay in your head, and you just go like, "Oh God!" It's like the it's like the little addictive. I don't want to say it's like sprinkling crack on something, but
sprinkling sugar on something, a little sugar,
a little sugar instead. But it's the thing that brings you back to the song that you always remember when the song is played, or if anyone even just mentions a song, that comes to mind. And he was brilliant at that.
And there would be things that would be so buried, you wouldn't even notice them the first 100 times you hear a song. That's why you can go back and listen to those songs he did, because you find something new every time you listen to it.
Yeah, anytime you can get a breakdown of a Quincy song, and on the internet you see these things all the time now where people actually separate the tracks.
The stems.
Yeah, and you can just hear one instrument at a time. You're just like, I didn't even know that was happening.
No.
And then you put it all together, then you hear it and you go like, wow. But yeah, he was a master at those things.
It wasn't even meant for you to hear necessarily. Like he wasn't putting it in like, oh, wait till they notice this flute in the background.
It's all part of the recipe.
Yeah, but it never got bigger than the melody of the song. He never let it overwhelm it because he knew how to, again, as a musician, he knew how to play it, he knew how to arrange it, he knew how to produce it, and he knew how to get the best out of every artist he worked with. He could get their sound out. Before we get to all of his big pop music, 'cause that's going to be the most of what we talk about, I want to talk about his work in films.
Yeah.
As a composer, he did a lot of scores. He scored like 40 films. I didn't know this until actually today. He was nominated for Best Original Song and Score at the 1968 Oscars for films from 1967. He was the first black man ever nominated for Best Original Song.
Did he do Heat of the Night?
He did. He was nominated for a movie called Banning for Song, and I think In the Heat of the Night for Score, and then was nominated again the next year. In total, Quincy was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, but only 6 were for music. Because to show the range this man had, he was nominated for Best Picture, because that's the Producer's Award, for co-producing The Color Purple. And the movie that introduced Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey to the world on a large scale. So Quincy's star maker, Quincy Jones.
There you go.
Also,
you're welcome, Oprah.
even later movies would use his music and it would become iconic from something he wasn't even involved with. So in 1962, because he would release albums as an artist, which would be him arranging and producing other people and other singers, he had an album called Big Band Bossa Nova. And there was a song on that album called Soul Bossa Nova. It wasn't like a big hit or anything. But in the 90s, it got used in a movie.
Someone resurrected it.
And everybody listening will recognize this and what movie it's from. I thought that was just made for Austin Powers.
Austin Powers.
I didn't know it was a Quincy Jones song.
It was a song that had been created and produced decades earlier.
Yeah, it's already 35 years old at that point.
Wow.
And it sounded great because it's timeless,
perfect
timeless music. Yeah, and also TV. He was an executive producer on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, helped get that show off the ground.
Crucial in the creation of that. And,
also, Mad TV. Remember Mad TV?
He was involved in Mad TV?
Quincy produced Mad TV. And did the music for Roots on television. And I think my favorite and your favorite.
Without a doubt.
Quincy Jones had a song called The Street Beater. And if that does not sound familiar to you, you will recognize it because it was the theme song from Sanford & Son.
The percussion in the back is like, again, there's a thing where every element of that song all comes together so perfectly. Like the percussion, every time I listen to it, I can't decide what I'm listening to more. Is it the percussion? Is it the harmonica?
That bass line.
The bass line. It's like so many elements to choose from there, and all of it just brilliant, man.
You know how like when you watch TV now, there's that little skip intro button?
Yeah.
Sanford & Son would be a show you would not skip intro on. I would, if that had been an option then, I would have listened to that every single time because you never get tired of hearing that.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know, when we got the news that that Quincy had passed, and I was just doing some research, I was looking into the musicians who played on that album because the song Street Beater was actually on a Quincy album, one of his solo albums, before it was used for Sanford & Son. And I was looking up all the musicians that played. And it was interesting. Back then, I guess a lot of musicians didn't get studio musicians. They didn't give them credits.
Right.
But I looked up and found the guy who played harmonica on that song, which I think is like the standout thing. Tommy Morgan, no longer with us, passed away last year. So
sad.
R.I.P. to Tommy Morgan as well.
Making theme songs in heaven with Quincy now.
Indeed. Think of the music they could be making up there now.
Well, that is a sad thing, looking at this list of all the people Quincy's worked with. How many are gone now?
Yeah.
He outlived so many artists he worked with who, a lot of whom were much younger than him.
Oh, yeah.
His first #1 hit as a producer, and this is one a lot of people don't know this. This is going back to the early 1960s. So Quincy was maybe 29 or 30 when this came out, with a teen singer named Leslie Gore, got to #1 with this song, It's My Party.
It's my party and I'll cry if I
those horns are so
Those
perfectly
horns, yeah,
arranged.
I mean, it sounds like it does sound almost like a jazz symphony going behind. Like it sounds like a Quincy song when you hear
Right.
it now, and you know all the other things he produced. But back then, that was the first.
And the
That
thing
was
is,
the blueprint.
that song, it sounds modern in a lot of ways. By what I mean, like the production of it.
Right.
Like the kick drum and the bass have a little thump to them that a lot of songs then didn't have. But it also fits in very much with the times, which was something that Quincy was really good at, was sounding contemporary and timeless at the same time. Like it could come out way in the future and sound good. It could have been an older, timeless arrangement. It could be a very current song. I think that's why a lot of Michael's songs still sound so good, because he didn't just try to go for what everything else sounded like. He would use elements.
You sort of
what was
start with that,
contemporary.
right? That like, we want this to sound contemporary, but
Right.
I'm going to do some other things that are going to be forever.
Right.
And boy, he did with those 3 albums
did.
with Michael.
And real quick, before we move on from Leslie Gore, we had to play It's My Party because that was his first #1 hit. That really put him on the map as a pop artist because he'd worked, like we said, with all these jazz artists, with Frank Sinatra. He'd done bossa nova music. That was a straight up pop record. It is not, to me, Leslie Gore's best song by any means. No. That was her #1 hit. The next year in '64, she got to #2. She got stuck behind I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, which,
A lot of people got stuck
if
behind
you're going to
the
get
Beatles.
stuck behind something, I
Sure.
guess that's one. And I think this is maybe her most famous song. I think this song is popped up
Whoa,
occasionally on
whoa,
TikTok at
hold
this
on.
point.
You don't think It's My Party is
With
her most
younger
famous song?
generations, I think they know this next song better. I think it's been used in commercials. It's been used, it goes viral every once in a while on some video.
I'll allow it.
This song, You Don't Own Me.
You don't own me. I'm not just one of your many toys. You don't own me.
No.
You don't like that better than
I don't often disagree with you, Eric.
Oh,
but
no.
No.
I mean, I like It's My Party, but
I know
it's like
maybe the
goofy
message,
teen fun.
There's a stronger message.
It's a feminist message to You Don't Own Me.
Right.
In
but I still think
1964,
It's My Party is it's just a jam. I don't know.
they're all jams. That's the thing. Quincy did so many jams and could have become a huge pop producer after Leslie Gore, I think, if he'd wanted. He didn't really. He went back to doing, others. Actually, the Frank Sinatra song, Fly Me to the Moon, was 64. That was the year after It's My Party. So he wasn't really interested in being the pop guy.
Yeah.
And through the 70s, doing Sanford and Son and stuff, he wasn't. He was really involved in film, which led to his pop moment because Quincy was involved in The Wiz.
Yes, the film, the Black Wizard of Oz.
I wanted you to say it. I didn't want to say
The Black
it.
Wizard of Oz. If you haven't seen it, it's entertaining.
Yeah, and it had Diana Ross as Dorothy
Mm-hmm.
and young, I think, still teenage Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
And so Michael was talking to Quincy. They didn't really know each other, I don't think, at that point.
No.
Not super well. And Michael was trying to really launch his solo career at that point. After almost a decade with the Jackson 5, and he had done solo stuff like Rockin' Robin and Ben, but he's like, I want to be a mature adult, take control of my career, pop star. So he asked Quincy for recommendations for producers. And I don't know if Michael was sincerely asking or he was trying to
or was he sort of toying with him a little bit, sort of like fishing. It's like, if you know
where can I get somebody as good as you to produce my album?
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, Quincy did give him a list of names. I don't know who was on it. I would love to know.
Yeah.
But then Quincy was like, you know what? I'll just do it. And at this point, Quincy had done some more pop stuff. He had produced the Brothers Johnson. I love them. Their song, I'll Be Good to You.
Yes.
One of my favorite songs, Strawberry Letter 23. So he produces with Michael, and they come out with Off the Wall in 1979. First single, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, goes to #1. The next single, Rock With You, goes to #1.
Mm-hmm.
Off the Wall, the title track, goes top 10. She's Out of My Life goes top 10. I think Michael, I believe that made him the first solo male to get 4 top 10 songs from one record.
All right.
Which now you can do in a single week.
everyone
But
does.
this was a big deal in 1980. And the album sold 25 million copies worldwide, one of the biggest albums ever. How do you follow that up?
And yet Michael's like, nah, we gotta be bigger. We gotta be bigger. How do we? Because his feeling was Michael's disappointment with the album was, and I don't know if Quincy felt this way, but that it didn't cross over as much as he wanted it to. That he felt like it was more of a black audience, and he wanted to appeal to a whiter audience as well.
So he got Paul McCartney and Eddie Van Halen.
There you go.
Which also, The Girl Is Mine on Thriller let Quincy Jones produce a Beatle.
That's right.
And back in the late 50s, Quincy was playing trumpet, I think, on the Dorsey Brothers variety show thing in the late 50s, which is where Elvis made his television debut before Ed Sullivan. And Elvis played with a studio band, and Quincy was second trumpet.
Quincy was second
So
trumpet
Quincy
in Elvis's
Jones
studio band?
technically performed with Elvis,
The Beatles.
produced at least Paul McCartney,
A Beatle.
Michael Jackson. I mean, Frank Sinatra.
Again, and Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
What more do you want the man to do?
I mean, that's pretty insane.
But yes, he does find a way to then go on and produce an album even bigger than Off the Wall and bigger than any other in history.
The biggest selling album of all time worldwide with Thriller, and then follows that up with Bad, that produced 5 number one hits
Right.
and sold like 45 million copies worldwide.
It is an incredible accomplishment to have done that and to not be daunted by, like, I always thought when I even heard that the Bad album was coming out, I was like, they're not going to
There's no
try
way
to do anything like that. And they did. It packed an album full of hits. I still don't think they're as lasting or as good as most of
No, I mean,
Thriller.
Dirty Diana and,
Yeah, you could do
it's not even like PYT,
Right.
but it was a number one song.
Yeah.
And then Michael and Quincy went their separate ways. Michael wanted to try new sounds in the 90s, got Teddy Riley, the hot New Jack Swing producer. And Dangerous, that album, was huge. Black or White was a big number one hit. Remember the Time's a great song, In the Closet. But it wasn't.
It was different, but I think he was just trying to change with the sound.
Yeah, you can't do the same thing over and over.
And that's cool.
And Quincy, all along, was also working with other artists. And one thing he always did was try to develop new talent. So Quincy would release albums as an artist. He had a handful of top 40 hits himself. He did not sing on them. But because he knew he needed a vocalist, he would try and find new talent. One guy that he made into a big star from his album The Dude in '81, James Ingram. Remember James Ingram?
Oh, yes.
He sang, let's play this song he did with Quincy. This
Put
is
it on. Come
Quincy featuring James Ingram. This song's called Just Once.
Just once, can we find a way to finally make it right?
I wish you guys could have seen Charles singing along to that.
Magic lasts for more than just one night.
100 Ways,
Yes.
find
Actually, I thought you were going to play
Yeah.
100 Ways.
It's a toss-up.
Oh, I love
And then James Ingram had he wasn't Michael Jackson, but he had a number one hit in the 90s with a song called I Don't Have the Heart. Also, in the early 90s, Quincy Jones found a preteen singer named Tevin Campbell, did a song with him called Tomorrow, A Better Me, A Better You, and it was a number one R&B hit. Wasn't a big pop crossover, but then Tevin Campbell did all right.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of hits.
Had a bunch
He
of
discovered
hits.
Tamia, who was a big R&B singer in the 90s, did the song So Into You. He was always looking for new talent, new voices, ways to update his sound, but he never sold out, for lack of a better word. He
Yeah.
never tried to jump on trends. Like when he did his album Back on the Block, which won him Grammy Album of the Year, the
He
first
did try
single...
to jump on a trend there.
Well, he did pull some hip-hop,
Yeah.
but it was his version of it.
Yes.
But even that, the first single from that was a cover of I'll Be Good to You, which he had produced for the Brothers Johnson, featuring Ray Charles and Shaka Khan, who were not the hottest top 40 artists in 1989. And I'm not saying that, certainly not a knock on Shaka Khan and Ray Charles.
Right.
It's just, if Quincy was just going for hits, he would have gone for whoever the hot new thing on the scene was.
But he did one of his songs that he'd produced before and just redid it with two huge names. But you're right, they weren't contemporary. But maybe the combination of Quincy doing it with them made that song. I don't know how high it got
It
on
was
40,
number
but
18 pop, but it went to number one R&B, just as the original Brothers Johnson version had
Right.
done. He did the song Secret Garden with, there was a bunch of artists on it, Barry White, Al B. Sure,
Yeah.
I think El DeBarge, another number one R&B hit. And that's
what's the song on that album that was the hip hop, which I loved not because it was the greatest song, but all of the rappers that he had on it, and there were great names.
they
on
were
it.
old school by that
Yeah,
point.
and they were
even.
old school, but they were all basically the raps were all about giving Quincy his props,
Right.
and it was like how the reason why they were here, and that was all their bars.
I'm hoping they wrote those bars themselves, because if Quincy's like, write a verse about how great I am, like, that seems a little, I don't know, that's a little self-serving. He actually, a very odd distinction he has, I just saw, was that he hosted Saturday Night Live in 1990. And for the musical segment, he had 10 artists come out and perform that song. He had Kool Mo D
Right.
there, Tevin Campbell came out, all these people, and it's the most musical artists in one segment in Saturday Night Live's history. To have
Really?
10 different artists,
Wow.
like not musicians in a band, but
Yeah.
actual individual artists. They had 10 acts come
Oh,
out
the
and perform.
green rooms must have been packed that night.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Quincy just and producing "We Are the World." You kind of forget he did that. He's
think
the only
thing
person who could have done that.
Right. And the reason, and that's something that is resurfaced that people are rediscovering because of the documentary that was on Netflix. Was that last year or earlier this year? Yeah, I mean, I think that showed everyone exactly how respected he was and how good he was at producing, and that he had this studio full of dozens of huge stars and still got the best out of each of them to piece it all together and make that song. My favorite part of that was the ending of toward the end of We Are the World, where you have the back and forth between Bruce and Stevie Wonder,
Yeah.
which I think is like the centerpiece of the song. They didn't actually plan for that. They revealed in that documentary that that's something that Quincy literally had recorded a bunch of stuff with Bruce. And he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I just want you to do this. And he had him record it. And it wasn't until later when he was in the studio, I don't even hours later that night, was like, actually, they said it was the next day.
Yeah, but they had recorded all that night.
But he had to record it all
They had a
that
short window to make that happen.
night. And he just had the wherewithal to be like, I think I can make this something. And
Yeah.
and he totally did.
Well, that's what I think was so great about him as a producer. One of many things is that, and I'm sure Quincy Jones had to have had some ego himself. You don't get to be the biggest producer in the world without some ego. But he always let the best idea win and let the songs go where they needed to go. It wasn't about forcing his sound
Right.
onto an artist or onto a song or onto an arrangement. It was whatever he thought would bring out the heart of the song and the melody of it and the direction of it.
Mhm.
And he would let it go that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill that a lot of producers don't have. They try to take their sound and just apply it to whoever they're working with or whatever the song is and make it sound like that. And I don't think he did that.
Yeah. I think he definitely, each artist who worked with him felt like he got the best out of me. And it wasn't that he was making a Quincy record, because even when you listen to Quincy's, his solo stuff, it sounds, there's a similarity in the production, but it's not the same sound.
No.
It's not the same sound.
There's a
as he did with
smoothness to
different
it.
artists.
And he had that jazz sensibility he could apply to songs that made them a little more interesting than most your average pop song would be. But like Michael Jackson's records with Quincy don't sound like the songs he did with James Ingram. They don't sound like
Yeah.
the stuff with Tevin Campbell later on. They don't sound like stuff he did with anybody else.
Yeah.
Because each artist was their own artist, and he appreciated that, I think. And that's probably why people loved working with him
Yeah.
so much. So we talked about Thriller. The tough question, what's your favorite song on Thriller?
I struggled with this question when you.
There's no wrong answer except for The Girl Is Mine. That's the wrong answer. That is not the right, that's,
Okay,
that's the incorrect answer.
I can reassure you it's not that. And I was going through the track list, and I was like, I was never a huge Beat It fan. I love Billie Jean.
But I've heard it so many times.
I've heard it so many times. Same thing for Thriller. But I think the one that stood out for me, even when I remember playing the album and playing the record, was Baby Be Mine. I don't know. It's like, and it wasn't released. There were only 2 songs, right? That
There were
released as
there were
singles.
9 songs in the album. 7 of them were singles. 7 of them went top 10.
Right. But Baby Be Mine, and I think I know why it appeals to me. It's very similar to my favorite song that Quincy's ever produced with Michael, which is the one we started the whole show with, which is Rock With You.
Well, if you don't know Baby Be Mine, given that it was the one like not hit on the record, this is what it sounds like.
It's got a like, I don't know, it's got an energy to it that it feels like a track that, and I don't know if it was left over from Off the Wall, but it feels like.
No, I think it had to have
It's
been
a little
after
more-
because it is kind of deliberately Rock With You. I think that's intentional. The same way, like honestly, Thriller's very similar to Off the Wall. The creepy, and it was written by Rod Temperton
Right.
from the group Heatwave, same guy. I think Michael was trying to recreate a couple of things in particular.
Right.
You know, why not? You had a formula, stick with it. But you think it helps Baby Be Mine that it wasn't one of the singles, so you're not so tired of hearing it?
Yes. Definitely. 100%. So what's your favorite?
I mean, Baby Be Mine is up there for me. I'm going to go with one of the slower songs on the album, which kind of surprises me because I usually like more up-tempo stuff. But for me, it's hard to beat Human Nature.
Oh, great pick. And you have, by the way, you have plenty of people backing you up on that pick because it's been sampled so many times. It's been redone.
SWV did it for their Right Here
Right.
Human Nature remix, a song written by the members of Toto.
Oh, that's right.
That's their song originally, and they gave it, but Michael did his own thing with it, of course, and that's one in particular to me. When you listen to that on headphones, listen to all the little things happening in that song, because it is a mellow song, and it's kind of a slower vibe, but there's so many little things, of percussion happening, little guitar flourishes in it. There's so much happening in that song. It's not a boring song. It's not a ballad.
Not a boring song at all, no.
No, and every time you listen to it, you can hear something new. Even 40 plus years later, it's like, oh, I never noticed that.
It takes a special chef to put that together so that that all these years later, you could listen to it and hear something that you didn't hear when you were playing the record back in the 80s. That's the magic of Quincy.
There weren't a lot of producers like him, especially in the 80s, where everything was so cranked up and loud and just maximalist, and he pulled back, which made those things sound different on the radio. You'd hear all these big songs, and then a Quincy song would come on, and it would just sort of quiet things down, but not in a boring way.
Right, yeah.
It would almost catch you by surprise, because you're like, wait, everything else was like, in your face.
To put things in through a modern lens, how you know that someone, when they pass, that they were giants, that they were respected by everyone, is when you just look at your social media feed. And every single celebrity, I don't care how big they are, how little they are, if they had any connection whatsoever to Quincy, or they just had a photo taken with Quincy, everyone posted something and continues to post things about Quincy.
Right.
Because they want to share with the world. And why wouldn't you? I mean, I was looking at him jealous, like, damn, I never met Quincy.
Never got a picture with him.
Never met him.
And even younger artists will acknowledge, R.I.P. to one of the greats. They know the name. They know
exactly what he did.
Right. It's like your favorite producer's favorite producer.
Exactly. I mean, that's how Dr. Dre explains it. So if you love everything Dre does, Dre himself credits Quincy as being the one who made him even want to be a producer. So.
Right. He studied how he did what he did, and it worked out for Dr. Dre.
I would say so.
I think so.
And it certainly worked out for Quincy Jones and all those that he worked with. What a tremendous loss. But
it is. And as we saw with when Michael passed, and something I'm sure Quincy Jones obviously knew long before he passed, that work lives forever. Yeah. And there's got to be some comfort in that, knowing I made a thing that will never go away, and people will love it for the rest of time.
Yep, absolutely. We will leave it there. Thank you, Quincy Jones, for all the incredible music, and R.I.P. And that's going to do it for us this week on Get to the Hook. See you next week.